Peace and blessings. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, friends and family of Bethel AME Champaign. As promised, this is your weekly sermon recap. This is where we go over Sunday's sermon. We talk a little bit about it, uh, answer any additional questions that people may have. Today, we're going to do something a little different. We're going to have a special guest who will be joining us soon. When he comes into the studio, I'll invite him in and we'll talk about it. So, as always, my beautiful co-host, and I was told by our our review board that we need to stop making Google eyes at each other and start looking at y'all in the camera and out there in Facebook land. And so I'm not even gonna look at her. Matter of fact, that's what I'm gonna do. So in order not to make Google eyes at her, there we go. So uh, the sermon yesterday concluded our with part three of our wonderful sermon series, navigating the space in between. What to do when you're waiting from point A, you've crossed the Red Sea, to point B, you haven't gone into your new normal. The space in between, as we've taught, wasn't the wilderness. Is not there to test you or to see where your faith is or to prune you. It's really a moment of waiting. It's waiting on God. And so, first week, we talked about how to be optimistic, how to keep your spirits up. The second week, we sort of talked about how everything was going to be all right, um, in that space. And how do we know everything's going to be all right? Well, Jesus promises and gives us several promises and assurances in nature. And then the last week, we talked about how to hold on in the space of the change that's coming. And because yesterday was the birthday of the church, capital C, we call it Pentecost Sunday. We definitely discussed that in context. And so, if you know your Bibles, there when Jesus ascended to the heavens after 40 days after his resurrection, 40 days of being with his people, he ascended to the heaven. He gave them instructions: wait until Jerusalem until you receive the Holy Spirit. And so, for a week, they sat in Jerusalem in a room and they waited. And then when you put that with the 40 days, they waited to figure out what the master plan was after the resurrection. There's a lot of space in between. And what happened? Acts 2 tells us that God came in loud, violent, and fiery. And so, and gave them a gift. They were able to speak the gospel in a manner which all people could hear and in a manner that all people could understand. And they could also hear. And so they went from talking the same language to different languages. And so the text goes on to say that people doubted that. And so they accused them of being drunk, emotional. And so Peter, having gone from being a coward, from having gone to be a kind of guy that left Jesus hanging, he goes and gives this wonderful speech. And he's like, man, listen, y'all don't even know what time it is. This is the Spirit of God. And he talks about it. And on that day, the disciples go literally from a dozen to 3,000, right? And so we talked about how the sermon talked about why God chose that way. He chose loud so people would know what was happening to draw attention. He chose fiery because we have to prune ourselves. Old things have to be burnt off. Things have to be burned into our mind. The tongues of flame, and violent, because he wanted to make sure nobody was doubting. This wasn't a small wind. It wasn't a summer breeze. It was the move of God. And so we talked about that in the space of the AME Church, the Black Church in general, but the AME Church specifically, that we are grounded on being a social justice church. And so when I looked over my sermon last night, Rev, I realized that where I was going, but I guess I was just all over the map. When we talk about we need the Holy Spirit back in the AME Church, I don't think we should be talking about needing halabosha shikarano, but the fiery, loud, violent Spirit of God to transform the world, that takes people from 12 to 3,000. And I think that we kind of want that, oh, Jesus, and that, but that ain't what they did. They literally got a spirit. And then I tied it in, and that's where our guest is going to help us with the second part. He's in the studio, so I'm going to bring him on in a second. That's where we then talked about uh, how to look at it in the context of Black politics and Black political thought. You know, Jesus kicked off a couple of riots when he was in the synagogue, and then there were at least two in John when they was asking him who sent him, John or God, and he broke it down, and then they were going to stone him, and there's this big riot so he could get away. And then, of course, the favorite everybody loves to invoke but never unpack, the money changes. When he got back after Palm Sunday, If you know your Bible again, on Palm Sunday, the first thing he did Monday morning was walk into the temple with his boys and create a riot. And so uh, that's where we were going. And then I ended talking about how I viewed the riots, and while I lament the loss of any life, uh, I don't know if I can begrudge these young warriors for how they're protesting after years of asking for things, being heard, the end of homophobia, end of transphobia, the fight for minimum wage, the fight for health care. Do we understand them? And really saying that I remember being that age and Black Studies major asking these same questions: Where's my living wage? Where's my universal health care? Why did Democrats run Al Gore? Like, I remember having these same questions, and now at 45, I'm bristling. I had to check myself. Why are you worried about what these brothers burned down? And we've become comfortable. We're at the elder stage of our lives, and so I think our 401ks, the houses we bought, the military training, we got the police training, our titles in the church has made us kind of scary, and we need to get that spirit back. And so that was my sermon. I'm gonna bring you in and introduce him, but go ahead.
I think from the beginning we have to look at, when we're talking about the church, is the image of Jesus. So if we just start there, many people have been lied to from the beginning. Jesus was not unicorn and rainbows. And we have very much made Jesus this, cool white guy, hippie white guy who, goes around sprinkling folks with, spirits. So I think that's the biggest thing that we have to address first, because in the church, that's always what it comes out looking like. So now when you come out now in this moment where the world is in chaos, and now people are now saying, and I think I would even say that is the problem with preaching in this moment, because now you have preachers saying Jesus was a protester, or Jesus was a protester. Now you want to say that, but you haven't been saying that your entire, you didn't teach me that at 6. You taught me that at 25. So this whole time, this image, so then you ask, where's the church? And to your point, now we're talking about this violent wind coming in. And again, we considered Christianity very peaceful, and when it has not been. And many people miss that. There's a part of peace, but it has not been peaceful. So we do struggle in that area. I think when people really stop to look at it, like you said, speaking in tongues and the spirit that compels you is definitely what happens. But a lot of times we miss the human agency of it. So where are you at in this space? What do you do in this space? And that's kind of the struggle I think people are having, especially Christians in this moment. So now you're debating with your white homies who attend the white church. Why are they doing this? And where's your Blackness at now? So now you have these questions, but why weren't you reading the Bible before and questioning what you've been taught all these years? So I think that is kind of the space as we talk about navigating the space. This is the space that I'm sitting in, talking to the youth and saying, I applaud you for being Christ-like when you go out to the protest, just also have discernment. So I think there's a piece of that. In agreement, or even understanding, the Black rage, it's real. And I think, like you just said, the comfortability of, I don't want to be too angry, really settles it back in history. Don't make them mad. Okay, they a little angry, but don't make them real angry. So some of us are like, look, you pulled up if that's what you're gonna do. And then there's many of us that are like, wait, I seen a meme on Facebook that somebody's grandma was like, ooh, that baby got sprayed like me. That don't piss you off. Like, that's hot that I'm going through the same thing my grandmother went through in 2020. And it's a whole pandemic. So I think we have to really step back and address that, because as we're navigating this space in between, what does that navigation look like, and where are we steering people? Because I wonder if we're still steering people to be comfortable. Don't worry, don't, Black Lives Matter, but hey, don't say it real loud. Just want a couple people to hear Black Lives Matter. Don't tell that white girl that we don't care about her white tears, because she's a white ally. I don't care about the white tears. It's like, sorry. So I think that's really where we're at in this moment. And now people are boldly saying, like, you got the whole Anonymous who took over the police scanners and things like this are happening, where people are now saying they're tired, and the older generation is worried. And they're worried and scared. I don't think there's anything else that we can call it. It's just worry and fear because I did this and nothing changed. So I don't want to send my son, my grandson, my granddaughter out there to now be killed. I can even go into, there's even Black women now saying y'all ain't got this much hype when it was us. Oh, we burning buildings for men, but we're not for women. So if I even want to introduce that into the conversation, where are we at with that? So again, navigating this space right now where are we steering people? That's really my question in this time, because sometimes we don't know where to steer them. Talking to youth, sometimes my answer is, I don't know, baby. Like, I'm just as scared and hungry as you are. Like, I wanted to take a walk this morning too, but I'm gonna sit in here and do this yoga because I don't know if Billy down the street is sugar happy. So this is where we're at. And I think navigating this is really on the context of steering it. So when you're trying to figure out where you are in the boat, now how do we square up so that we all can row together?
Indeed. That's an excellent segue. And so I want to bring in our guest for today. He is my sworn brother. I've known him going on 20 years now. If you ever want to know why I'm sitting in the captain's chair, I tell this story all the time. It was Andre Harrell firing Puffy. Listen, I think you got another calling. So I need you to go to seminary and be a pastor, but he is my brother. I love him. Definitely will be at my wedding party. This is Dr. Joseph L. Jones. He is a scholar. He's a former scholar president. We founded the Social Justice Initiative at Philander Smith College together. He was the first director. And most importantly, he has a PhD in political science. And then so I realized that y'all just get tired of parents writing white books behind me and stuff. So I brought in a scholar. I learned that from Joe. Bring in a scholar. And so the other day on Facebook, he was talking about Black rage and the different aspects of the movement. And so in light of what you heard, and so I'm gonna hit you with what's going on the ground, even when I just left at Champaign, Urbana. There was, as you know, it appears to be a coordinated thing across the country. Rebellion sprung up, a lot of property damage. It's kind of shifted the focus from the murders of the three, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and just George Floyd. And now we're talking about they've gone from being the victims to Target, Walmart. Oh, they're destroying their own communities. And so even today, when we went to the protest, I had to, gently remind speakers, don't do a comparative analysis. Don't talk about this is the way to protest as that's the wrong way. But maybe I'm lacking the language here. So in a way you're comfortable, surmise your position and how you understand the acceptable, and I'm putting in quotes, peaceful protest versus the more violent protest.
Somebody about to get a whooping real quick though.
Yeah, I had to shoot the kids. So let me break it down in a couple of ways, and I'll try to surmise my Facebook post, which when I put it out there, I didn't realize how many people it resonated with, because what I find is that people lack the language. They can look at stuff and say, that don't sound right, but they don't have the language to try to explain what they're seeing and what they're hearing, and how problematic the framing it is in the media. And so just to surmise it, I was saying, in the Black struggle, there's always been two shifts. It's been a day shift and a night shift, right? And the day shift is civil rights, petitioning the state, morality, nonviolence. But there's always been a night shift in the Black experience, where you have individuals who uprise, who are revolutionaries, who are insurrectionists, who are civil disobedient, who are practicing civil disobedience against the state. And to say that there is one right way or wrong way to protest, to me, is utterly problematic. Because, and I gave the example of Harriet Tubman. I mean, she was literally a criminal. I mean, she was committing a criminal act. And when we think about it, she was literally stealing so-called property, right? And taking it back, taking it away from the United States. And so if we were to use this same lens today to look at people like Harriet Tubman, to look at people like the Panthers, to look at groups like the Black Liberation Army, and they would have no role in our struggle. And so that was my first piece. And let me tell you a story, Terrence. I'm teaching a class this summer on political economy.
You're not gonna tell me the story?
Okay, I'm sorry. Reverend Wilson and Reverend Thomas, let me tell everybody who's watching, let me tell you a story. Just and this was like one of the most profound things that I heard when I held my class this afternoon. And I have a student who actually lives in Chicago. And when he got on the chat, I mean, he was running. There were gunshots and stuff, and he was running to the house. And I'm like, what's going on? And he was talking about, he was describing his reality, and just the chaos that was going on in his backyard, literally in his backyard. He showed us the phone like it was a strip mall. People were out there just gathering things as they could. But he worked at a grocery store, and when he got off last night, he said right when he was getting off, that's when everybody started coming into the store and started grabbing stuff. And he said, Dr. Jones, he was like, I was so conflicted. He was like, this was my work, but he said it was so organized. He said these people were they got the safes, they got the money, people who were leading it, I guess, and they took the I guess the 50s and the 20s. Then they started passing out the 5s and the 1s to everybody else. Then they started going through all the food and everything and just passing like who needs what, like in a very orderly manner. He's like it was all communal on how they were stealing the stuff. Wow. And so I was listening to him and I was just like, see, that's the part that you don't get, you don't hear in the media, right? We view them as just thugs who just stealing stuff, but there is a sense of camaraderie and more importantly, need, right? Because a lot of our communities are impoverished, like they don't have basic things. And the fact that these brothers and sisters were empathetic and conscientious enough to be able to do that. Like he said it wasn't all for oneself where everybody was fighting for one. He's like, no, it was organized. Like people were literally asking what you need and everything. So that spirit tells me that there's something different, right? And then the last point, and I'll stop, is this insistence of, equating property to people. And this is this kind of neoliberal, we call it neoliberalism in political science, just the very heavy emphasis on property over people's rights. And what we've seen specifically in the past 20 or 30 years is that there's been policy that has been passed to kind of equate corporations on a human or a personal level. Like one of the biggest court cases, like Citizens United, like that was one of the big court cases, right? Where basically corporations can be viewed as a person in the vote and so on and so forth. But if you listen to the language in the media and when they're describing the violence, right? And I'm not a lawyer, but I know a little bit about the law, that violence can also be interpreted to harming property, right? So when they're talking about the destruction of property, they'll use this term of violence. Well, now you're saturating. Now you're basically saying that a store that's being burned down has the same value of George Floyd's death in the street. That's very problematic for me. And we gotta have perspective. I'm sorry, and so for me, I'm clear. There's a day crew and there's a night crew, right? And what we're seeing is a uprising. Right, we are seeing, and more importantly for me, these are political acts, right? These are political acts aimed at state power, injustice, and then the other post that I posted before that, I talked about this kind of PTSD that all of us carry as Black folk, right? Yeah, if we see George, Breonna, Ahmaud, but if we're honest, every Black person, these are triggers for us. In our own lived experience, and seeing this stuff. And so all this stuff comes rushing back. Now, everybody is not, conscious enough to deal with those emotions. Some people act out violently. Some people, they ball up into a ball. Like the trauma is real, right? And so what we see a lot of these young people out here is reacting to trauma. And it's amazing that there are, so many protests all around the country, which tells me that there are Briannas, that there are Ahmauds, that there are Georges in all of these cities. And so those were the triggers. And so that, yes, they may not even known these brothers and sisters, they might have seen the tape, but there are local stories. And so that is fueling the fire, and people have just had enough. This is a political uprising. These are not a bunch of deviants who are out there just tearing stuff up and just doing all these other kind of things. No, there and to dismiss that is to dehuman, our brothers and sisters and their trauma, in which all of us have gone through. And I refuse to do that. So I'm clear in my mind about how I understand what's happening right now.
I appreciate that, bro. If you didn't catch it earlier, I just got to tell you real quick. That's Alexis I've been telling you about.
I figured that out real fast.
So one of the pushbacks I've been getting from close friends, I'm in Facebook jail, but I can still see everything, and so I've been inundated with these videos of folks walking through the grocery stores like bootleg Vietnam reporters. This, look at the aftermath of the destruction. Look at how we did our community. And then one of my members said today, love them to death. These Negroes won't get out to vote. They don't do this with black people get shot. Now they angry. As a teacher, as a political scientist, with way more tact than the preacher, what do you say to that? I
call BS, and I'm gonna tell you why.
Okay.
And I hear this argument. Well, let's just say two things. One, when we talk about this so-called black on black violence, no, there is rage. Let's be very clear. No one watches anybody in the black community and not be upset, whether it's just on a family level, on a community level. People hurt, right? And so let's just be clear about that. It may not spill up to a national, but there is pain. So let's be clear about that. The second thing is, when we're talking about this whole notion of how can I say this?
Make your point.
When we're talking about this whole notion of equating, like it both of them can be the same, right? And so yes, people hurt regardless of people's life, but the most important, salient point, and I heard Michael Eric Dyson say this, and I'll quote him on this. He was like, the difference between what's happening now and what happens in our communities is that 9 times out of 10, the people who kill somebody get arrested and they get convicted.
That part.
You see what I'm saying? And so that is such a salient, point that we have to emphasize. Yes, law and order works. So people are not just getting away with this. And we see the militarization in our communities and when these things happen. So, so let's just be very clear. But what we're talking about is state power, right? We're talking about the very state that is charged with, so-called serving and protecting us. That's what people are upset against. In the backdrop of a whole racialized history, in the backdrop of a whole political economy that exploits the very people that are being killed, and so so there to me that I don't see a contradiction in seeing some of the internal contradictions that we have in our communities about brothers and sisters so-called killing each other, which is a myth in itself, because anybody who looks like themselves in the communities, they that's just the way it is. There's no such thing as black on black crime. It's just proximity, basically. And so, but it's thrown up, and a lot of these arguments are thrown out of very conservative, talking points, just to kind of deflect, the oppression or the attack of state power on Black lives. And so I push back at those arguments categorically for those basic reasons.
Okay. I was thank you for saying that, because I do get flustered with that argument. I even, today, a good friend of mine, she was posting on her live the Walmart, and I was like, but they haven't even released a statement. At least Reebok released a statement. Netflix was the first one to say, listen, we make money off y'all. Black Lives Matter. Like, if for no other reason. Right. So we're and for me, I think I sent you the pastor's corner I wrote. These companies won't even give a living wage.
Right.
And
right.
So and it's always a threat of divestment from, and especially among the civil rights alum. That's our nickname for the boomers, y'all. They talk about, well, we got a black mayor. They took all the business out of Gary. And when we said something to one person one time down here in Champaign, everybody left. And so, but I tell them that's not a reason not to speak up, that just proves white supremacy is a sin. That just proves the evil of it, right? Because if your response to truth is a violent action like economic stranglehold,
Right.
then that proves that, you know, your commentary, you don't stop your commentary. That's the point. You keep pushing. And so I this morning, you know, that was a lot of it. How would you respond to those who say that at this point it's no longer about Floyd, Taylor, or Arbery, but it's a bunch of thugs out here being opportunistic? Because that also came up in the meeting.
Yeah.
Half of the guys can't spell black rage, and they out here. So the question is, what does Lens Crafter have to do with black rage? What does the TV from Walmart have to do with black rage? There's nothing but people want to steal chicken. How do you?
So no, so like I said, I take a more aggressive, dare I say, radical interpretation of this. I say all of it is a political act. Like it is. And so no, so what and when you do that, and so this is where the splintering comes, right? When you try to say what is legitimate, you know, what is a legitimate way to protest state power, right? State power can't tell me what's legitimate. I'm sorry. Like you have no say in this. I'm sorry. And the very fact that you're trying to frame that, you know, and kind of going back to what I was saying earlier about our whole experience, how we've always had strands in the African American experience of the night shift crew, and we needed those folk to hold civil disobedience, to push, you know, to break laws, literally break laws in order to, you know, get our point across. And then I made this point in my piece. I'm like, you know, I truly believe, and I argue with anybody, the only reason why that one officer got indicted was because of the night crew. Was because that police station went up in flames in Minnesota. I believe that, because if that didn't happen, I think they still would have been taking their time, and there still would be 4 people who haven't been indicted. And until all 4 are indicted, I think we're going to continue to keep seeing this rebellion go on and on and on, because people and so you can't sit up here and say that everybody out there has got to have like a political consciousness and they got to, you know, be able to articulate why they're doing what they're doing. You know, no, they're processing any way that they know how. They just know something is wrong, right? And it's interesting, kind of going back to the property, you know, discussion. You know, they're hitting up all these stores, right? And if I were to take some time and really unpack about how corporations, to your point in your Pastor Corner piece, right, how they have exploited, you know, Black labor for generations. Hell, let's be clear. The reason why we came over here was to work. We almost 200 or 300 years of free labor, right? And so in my mind, and like I said, I take a more progressive, you know, view of this. No matter how many shoes, chicken, like anything, it's never going to come close to the debt that is owed to Black folks. So if this is how folk are getting their so-called reparation, so be it. So be it. You know, because if this is the way that you're going to respond, and here's the chain reaction, reverends. See, I got it. Here's the chain reaction, right? And we see this is what happened, right? So the community goes out and they pillage, you know, these stores. Corporations go to state power and say, hey, you need to do something because my stores are being privileged. Even if that means charging these officers, do something. State power says, okay, you know what? Because we're pretty much in debt to corporate power, we're going to do this so we can make sure that your lives aren't. So there's an effect. There is strategy behind all of that, because we know the power that corporations have over political power right now. So no, I see I see strategy. I don't see it separated. Now, I'm not saying the brothers and sisters on the street have this kind of, you know, serious analysis, but for me, I see the reactions of it. And we saw it last week. And so, no, because clearly left up to their own devices, they're not going to provide justice for us. And so, and then I think I said this before, like, how dare you, the hypocrisy, how dare you, right? You commit an illegal act, right, by killing a Black man in the middle of the road. And then you have the audacity to tell me to protest in the confines of the law. Like, really? Like, come on now, really? I mean, so that's the kind of hypocrisy that we're dealing with. Like, you can't sit up here and just frame and tell us, okay, this is the most legitimate way of doing things when your officers who were charged to protect life took life.
Come
And
on,
you
brother.
still not doing what you're supposed to do to bring them to justice. So that's how I see it.
You and I, Rev, I know you gotta. Are you good on time, Lex, or you gotta go?
No, I do have to go.
Okay. Anything you want to add before?
No, I think I'm good. I think the last question, or what I may have asked, was really stemming around the actual showing of it. We consistently keep seeing these things, and is it harmful or helpful that we keep watching it, and the consistent trauma that we keep replaying? Does that increase our Black rage? Does that, I think of Emmett Till. I just go back to those thoughts. Is this something that is pumping this up? Even the replaying consistently, people are sitting in a state of anger.
Right.
Like I can't go to certain connections of my job because I'm like, yo, I walk in that building, somebody said the wrong thing today. It's a wrap. So I think like we have to, like, what is that? I don't know, because there's part of me that says stop sharing, and there's a part of me that says there's power in the share. So address that as I switch over to my class here. But that's kind of where I want to leave off, and understanding and having that conversation to say, what is the power in the share? Is there power in the share? Is this just causing more rage? And is it good? Because the part of me that also says it's good to stay angry. Then maybe something will change. But thank you. Nice seeing you, Joe. Joe.
Thank you, dear.
All right.
Reverend Lex, y'all. Bye-bye.
Yes.
So is there power in sharing this from a political standpoint? I see it as propaganda, but I know it works. It can work against you. It can wear you down. That's it's clergy who deals with trauma. That's my only pushback. It desensitizes you. So it's kind of like, it's not like when Mamie Till, to Lexus's example, opened. We didn't know the horrors of lynching. We knew the horrors of lynching. We see the kind of like they rushed the bodies off, but to see the horrors of lynching,
see the lynching, yeah,
right. So are we at a point now that we probably don't need to see the lynching anymore, or we need to keep
the catalyst? I think that's what's different, because if we're honest, I mean, we've seen this in the past 5 or 6 years, almost 7 years, going back to Trayvon, right? And so, but this video was so visceral, it was so just, I mean, I had a physical reaction just watching it, because you literally see the life pouring out of that brother's, body, and bystanders pleading with state power that he's dying, that he's restrained, and then just, and it's almost as if they were just robots, like with no empathy, so I think that's a very important thing for people to see, because that experience, as much as I can describe this to white folk about that feeling of just being, the feeling of powerlessness, the feeling of just dehumanization, and describing my own experience, but to be able to see it through state power executing this on a Black body, that was different, man. That was, and so that video is gonna, and I believe this is why America's burning, and it's been burning, and it's going to continue to keep burning. I was looking on New York Times this morning, and I think there were all but 2 states out of the whole entire United States that did not have protests. I mean, from coast to coast, and from Alaska to Hawaii, they're out there protesting, and all the way to London and Berlin, Germany. Man, Berlin, Germany, they protesting against this. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is different. This is different, man. So
it was something to see. It was something to see two redneck vigilantes doing something illegal. That was horrible. It was something like really, like, that triggered the hood Terrence. Like, I wish but I can even get to Floyd's video. Like, you can feel his, like, so I agree with that. I think it's different. And I hope it inspires change and really what to do. Now, one of the things though, and I want to ask you this, and because I respect you, most people would know you're a man of faith too. The clergy in response to this has been, at least in my area. So let me contextualize it. Kind of like,
Yeah.
what would you say to your pastor? What would you want to see from your pastor in the midst of all this? I make no secret that some of my folks think I'm way too radical, and I tell them, I don't know what to say. But if you were on Sunday morning, what did you want to hear from your pastor, and what do you want to see your pastor doing in this moment?
To speak to the pain, right?
Mm-hmm.
To not just give a pie in the sky, everything's going to be all right, but just acknowledge, the pain. To be able to speak to this historical moment, right? To be able to empower people. Of course, in the church, we it is a place to come to get inspiration, right? I get that. Like it's we need that as Black folk, but at sometimes what I would want my pastor and other pastors to do is to validate, the pain and to validate the social actions that is going on. You and I, we've had these conversations about, and we call it, the civil rights alum, but one of the litmus tests that I've always found to be true when I talk about people, when I talk to people from that age, because everybody say I marched with King and I did these things and I was part of the civil rights movement, when we know that most of them have not been.
Mm-hmm.
They'll claim it, but most of them they just weren't. But the litmus test that I found for people who were really connected to struggle is that they're still doing struggle things. Like they're still connected in one way or another to some type of a continuum and doing the work, because they realize that it's an ongoing process. It's not an era. It's not a movement. It's constant, right? So it's a part of your life all the time. And so what I would like pastors to do is not only just in this moment, but even when there isn't like a national outcrying, to be able to speak to oppression and how that actually impacts the daily life of Black folk. Like, I don't think that's talked about enough in churches. Yes, we can talk about, losing jobs. And I hear the same spiel, trying to get a new job and, or to some extent trying to get a spouse or, trying to get through grief or whatever. But white supremacy, man, like takes up a big chunk of our life. And as an institution, I think Black churches need to consistently talk about it in ways that affirm, our lived experience, because all of us in one way or another go through it, either it's through the job or whether it's driving. And so it should not just happen at these egregious moments. It ought to be part of just the whole sermon series. Not saying every sermon's got to be about it, but I mean, when you pray and you're trying to lift up the congregation, acknowledge that, yes, praying for people who are suffering, from oppression and so on and so forth, or these policies that impact, this part of the congregation. There are ways for you to do it to let you know that, yes, I understand, I feel that, that pain that you go through, and so that's what I wanted to hear. And to some extent, Pastor did do that this Sunday. He did speak to it. And he talked and he weaved in Pentecost and talked about, this moment, which I was utterly proud of. But I'm not sure how many, pastors actually did that and will do that or are comfortable with doing that, because they perhaps don't even see the, the connections between the two. So that's what I want.
I definitely see these moments as, I don't think God sent COVID, but I think there was a reset, divine reset. But I did see when I was writing my sermon the connection between the Pentecost and again how the Spirit of God moved. And I think sometimes we as a church, especially, and I'm always speaking of the AME context, we literally were started in protest.
Right.
The greats come out of the AME church or the AMEZ church. I mean, Harry Tubman, David Walker, Gabriel Park. I mean, all of that.
Yeah,
and so the church where the scholars came from. So now we're the church that's kind of like, child, I guess. And I struggle with that. And I think that we're trying to get the wrong spirit. Like I said, ain't nothing wrong with the hala both shots, but I don't think that's the spirit we need. We need the violent, fiery spirit to transform the world.
Right.
And so that's where I was.
And then the other part of it is, and this kind of goes back to this framing of this moment. People like to harken back to, if I hear King's name one more time, man. If I hear his name one more time, it enrages me, man. Because first of all, let's debunk some myths, okay?
Go for it.
The civil rights
We got 5 minutes. It's yours.
The civil rights movement was not a nonviolent movement. It was violent as hell. People were dying. Okay, people were getting their butt kicked. Let's be clear about that. All right. Secondly, King, the year before he died, people go out there and get this book, A Trumpet of Conscience, right?
Mm-hmm.
He argued for civil disobedience because he understood the value of it. He was going to go back to Washington and shut it down and start talking about economic issues. You know what I'm saying? So don't. Yes, exactly. So don't talk about, this is dishonoring kings. Like, no, he would be out there with these folk.
And we had the last $2, why we can't wait and
yes,
the one you just named.
Yeah, Trumpet of Consciousness. Yes,
Trumpet of Consciousness. He calls it out.
Yes,
I think I've integrated my people into a burning house.
Yes,
he softens on his opposition to Black Power. If anything, when people invoke Malcolm, I say, man, Malcolm died. I love him, but Malcolm died an ideological mess. He was all over the map. I've even come to say on it. Maybe people invoke the Panthers. They were all over the map, and that's a big issue for me. But when you talk about King, his last year,
it was clear. It was clear. He knew what to happen. He knew what it would take in order to get state power to what it took, and it had to take a totally different tactic. Like these, you literally have to break the law in order to get justice. And so this is the moment that we're in. So no. So yeah, in many ways, when people are ignoring the curfew, right? When people are out there, protest, like that is part of civil disobedience, and that is connected to the struggle. So no, I hate when people hijack King or just keep him time bound into one speech when the brother lived 5 more years and evolved and was very critical of his own self, right? Even after his speech, when the 4 little girls, got killed in Birmingham, like he came back and was just like, I don't even know what I would just say back in August, right? I mean, if you go back and you read him, like he wrestled with that then because he understood that it was just
his loss, and we don't talk about his defeat in Albany, his defeat in Chicago.
Yes.
Those things hardened him, because he realized that his movement, I've come to call the Black Power movement the Northern Civil Rights Movement. He come to realize that it's up here is a different beast, and so we don't talk about that. We do keep him bound. There's a meme going on: man changed the world and was nonviolent, and I said he would struggle with that,
right?
And so I do think that but I also realized too that unfortunately we're living in a very ahistorical period where we don't understand the connection. That's why I think in tying it back and closing it out, I connected my sermon to a movement, the Pentecost movement, because from that they didn't just go and sit on the rock. They literally went out and changed the world. If you read, I tell any Christian, if you read the book of Acts, it's nothing but debates and riots. They chasing Paul out the city, they chasing Peter out the city, the government locking them up, and so it's a consistent battle against oppression to a point that 200 years later, Constantine finally had to say that it's not, we just make this ours because these folks ain't stopping. So I think that we have to honor these movements as acts of God. The moral arc of the universe bends towards justice, and so we can't quelch it. But I did want you to come on and share at least with the small community I have. And I wish the other page wasn't in jail because it would have been much larger. The evangelicals reported me one too many times. So but I want to thank you, bro. You my brother, and I love you for breaking it down because I'm on my way to a prayer in a park. But even today we did a protest, and somebody said to me, Rev, this is what I'm talking about. We were able to come out here 1,000 strong, no violence. I said you were only able to do that because they rioted yesterday.
That's right.
So you felt compelled by something to come out here.
Yeah.
Something in that act made you get off your behind and say,
that's
okay,
right.
let me do this part. And so the other side, and I agree with you, and I'm glad and I'm gonna use that. We've always had. Ozzie Davis said it. I encourage people to get their eyes on the prize, especially the episode on Malcolm X. He said, King and them, and Malcolm knew this.
Yes.
Hey, you talk to them or you talk to me.
That's right. That's right.
Because they'll work with you. I'm not going to work with you.
I'm burning it down.
We need to own that. To your point,
and there's strategy behind that. Like it's not something, and it's a political act, and that's the most important part that we got to uplift is that it's just not some aimless thing. No, like I said, there's a residual effect, and that's important.
Yeah. Well, that's all the time we have, man. Thank you so much, man.
Anytime, brother.
Breaks, man. I got to get down there. Definitely got to get you up. See if you can make people walk out of my church like you know. One last question for you.
Yes, sir.
I'm thinking about putting on the marquee, white supremacy is a sin. What you think about that?
I say make sure it's all in capital letters.
I love you, man. God bless y'all.
All
We'll
right,
see you
brother.
tomorrow on the prayer call, man. Take it easy.
All right, bro. Peace.
All right, peace.